time is it leave?
It's waiting now, he said.
Oh, great.
10.
Mga 10.
It's early in the morning in Cebu, an island in the heart of the Philippines, nicknamed the gateway to 1,000 journeys.
120.
120?
This is specially fitting for Jacob Maentz, a photographer who spent the last 10 years traveling to indigenous communities all over the Philippines.
All right. Here you go, guys. Tickets.
Yay.
We're going on a ride.
Today's journey takes us to Olango Island, one of the 7,641 islands in the Philippines, where he's photographing a small seaside community largely responsible for the beachy home decor you find at your local Walmart or TJ Maxx.
Can I have a picture?
Yep, those 6 decorative starfish you get at Pier 1 Imports for $10.99 probably come from Olango. Their journey from ocean to store hints to a bigger story.
Typically, indigenous people are pretty in tune with their natural surroundings, right? And they have this really strong relationship with the ocean, with the land. But times have gotten harder and people demand more, like there's more resources people need in order to survive.
To get there, you first hop on a ferry.
This is pretty crowded, huh?
It's so crowded that the 3 of us are sitting on a cooler. And when we make it to Olango, we join a line of about 50 people making our way from the boat to the dock on a plank stretched over crystal clear blue waters.
Dude, this podcast stuff goes in the water.
Then we flag down a tuk-tuk.
Are we gonna fit?
Can you 2 fit in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
You're going in the back?
I'll go in the back of the motorcycle, yeah.
Oh, the motor.
Yeah.
Jump on the back of the motorcycle.
Yeah, unless you want to sit there.
No. Absolutely not.
Jacob's been here before, thankfully, so we follow him down this dirt path, past some wooden houses, ducking under clothing lines, to a clearing where roosters and chickens roam free. On the ground, there are hundreds of starfish, sea urchins, and sand dollars drying under the sun.
This is all for decorative export, mostly to the U.S. is what I've been told in the past.
Further down the way, 2 ladies are scrubbing a barrel full of sea urchins.
Embonium with veg.
Symbonium?
20.
Beside them, there are dozens more, filled to the brim with more urchins, awaiting sorting and processing.
But as you can see, they're in the thousands and thousands of starfish.
Probably millions throughout the year.
Yeah, exactly.
Seeing them work under the hot sun, smelling the sea life all around, I have so many questions about their way of life and their connection to nature. And it's obvious that's exactly what Jacob had planned when he brought me here. Because one of the first things he says to me is, land is life. 3 words that will echo in my mind forever. I'm Michael Motometti, and you're listening to No Fixed Address, the world's most extraordinary people, presented by Matador Network. 2 years ago, I quit my job as a marketing executive and decided to travel the world with my wife
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
and our baby daughter. We sold our home, our cars, packed a bunch of clothes into a small suitcase, and now live in a new country every single month. And something I've come to love about living on the road is the people I meet. So I decided to start a podcast. That way you can meet them too. Oh my God, getting to this location has to be the strangest and coolest thing we've done so far.
Yeah. A van to a ferry to a tuk-tuk.
Yeah, but it wasn't even just, I've been on tuk-tuks, I've been on ferries. This ferry was like literally for locals. Like, it's not like for tourists. This is people are using this to commute. It like reminded me of those boats at 5 a.m. in Guatemala and like Etitlán. You're crammed like sardines. And you're like, how long is this going to take? Everyone's pretty normal. They've done this 100,000 times. We happen to be literally, like we said, sitting on coolers. Like they probably had steaks under there or something.
You know what's signature Philippines, though? The one thing that you'll always get in a ferry there, I think, is somebody singing a karaoke song. Behind you, beside you.
That's
And people
true.
there are so musical. I think especially in Cebu, like everybody sings, everybody has a great voice wherever you go, no matter what you do.
Yeah, everywhere in Cebu was karaoke. You're right. I forgot all about that. That is exactly what I remember now. I mean, in stores, our neighbors.
Even when you rent a house, it comes equipped with a full karaoke machine.
Not only that, my masseuse was like singing. I swear to God, singing Celine Dion while she was massaging me. Didn't say a word. I loved it. I thought it was added to the experience.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was fantastic. But Cebu in general fell in love. We were there for a month. The snorkeling, the scuba, everything is absolutely fantastic. The people are super nice, just like all Filipino people that I've met. Cebu is really known for, what was that pork dish? Lechon, that's what it was. So Cebu is really known for lechon, which is basically they take the pork belly, they flatten it out, they stuff it with amazing things, they roll it and then roast it for hours, and you get this amazing crispiness on the inside, and then you got the meat at the second layer, and then you got all the veg on the inside. I mean, and the actual inside. So yeah, so we experienced a lot of the food there, which was awesome. All in all, I think the Philippines this is a fantastic country. Obviously, we spend most of our time in Cebu, but definitely would go back.
And going back to that village where Jacob took us, it was kind of just the tip of the iceberg of the complexities and the ways that people in the Philippines and specifically the indigenous communities relate to nature.
And relate to the metropolitan gentrification that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that happens in a lot of countries. You know, talking to Jacob, one of the first things that I wanted to understand was, how does an indigenous tribe or village or people make a new way of living while the future's catching up, right? I mean, you have this huge metropolitan city of Cebu or Manila, then you have these islands that are just right off the coast of these main lands that are, barely have electricity. And yet they're trading with these cities and these suppliers because they need to make a living. It's very interesting to think that they're trying to hold on to their way of life. This is at least my opinion, as much as they possibly can, and the pureness of it. But they completely understand that they have to have a relationship with this other way of lifestyle, this other lifestyle that they might not even agree with.
Like anything, their lifestyle is evolving and growing as the world changes.
It's pretty interesting. Let's get into it.
Jacob is an American documentary photographer based in Cebu. He moved here 20 years ago and has spent the last 10 years working on a photography project titled Homelands. In that time, he's photographed more than 40 indigenous communities all over the Philippines, in hard-to-get places where there's no roads, in villages that are only accessible by plane, in the mountains, through bamboo groves, on the seabed. He's become a trusted voice for a lot of these communities, some of which call him to witness ceremonies or rituals that have never been seen by outsiders before. Today, we're sitting down with him at one of those tiny villages on the side of the road. So please excuse us if you hear a tuk-tuk drive by or kids playing in the background. We are in the thick of it, meeting Jacob in his element, surrounded by the very people that motivate him to do this kind of work.
Just so you know, this episode is sponsored by Guide Geek. If you're booking a trip, check out Guide Geek, a new way to plan travel. It's an AI chatbot built on OpenAI, but what's cool is that it's actually curated by human travel experts at Matador Network, the world's largest independent travel publisher. I've been using it for a while now, mostly on WhatsApp, but you can use it on Instagram Messenger too. I often ask for advice on what neighborhoods to stay in when I'm booking accommodations, or you can get a little deeper and ask how Anthony Bourdain would enjoy a specific city. It's amazing. Head to guidegeek.com to try Guide Geek for free and start planning your next trip. That's guidegeek.com to start planning your next trip with your newest AI travel assistant. Jacob, thanks
Michael,
for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and for coming here and traveling out here to Olango Island with me as well.
And we're in the middle of I wouldn't say indigenous, but rural at the very minimum, right?
Yeah, so Olango Island is definitely a more rural setting than Cebu City is. Cebu City is a city of 2 million people. It's a big urban environment. So even just, an island away, a couple of kilometer boat ride, we're already in a much more rural setting, a much more, it's mostly coastal communities here.
And very welcoming, to be honest. I mean, we look pretty foreign.
Yeah, I mean, Filipinos in general are really welcoming people, really hospitable. So in most places that you go to, you're going to be welcomed with open arms.
And I've noticed that I've been here for a while. I mean, not a while, but 3 weeks now in the Philippines. Everyone is extremely nice, and you don't look Filipino.
No, I'm not. No Filipino blood in me.
And you live in Cebu for how many years now?
Yeah. Wow. It's been a while. We've been in Cebu since 2006.
Wow.
And I first came to the Philippines in 2003 as a volunteer.
And never went back.
Yeah, pretty much. I've been here ever since. So what is that? 20 years now. So
yeah. What do you love about the Philippines?
Wow, that's a great question. There's a lot actually, but I think really what it comes down to are the people. That's really what makes the experience here. I think it's the warmness of the people. It's the sense of community, I would say, as well.
Well, even just today, just right now, we're on the side of the street and we just asked the store clerk whether we could borrow his table. And it's like a gambling table. And he was like, yeah, so hospitable. He set us up here and we're recording a podcast on the side of the street in somebody's store. Really.
We're all human and we're all kind. I mean, I don't know. At least I like to see that part of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's sort of one of the human characteristics that all cultures, all peoples, all nations have, right? Is this sense of being human, right? And maybe culturally it's presented, and it's definitely presented in different ways. For Filipinos, it's like this outgoing sense of hospitality. They don't want confrontation. They want to be even if in the times of trouble, you'll see Filipinos smiling.
It's so true, because every country has different mannerisms, different social structures, different what is okay, basically, right? And so as long as you allow yourself to take that barrier down, where you're like, hey, I'm talking to someone completely different from another part of the world. Let me understand where they're coming from. The conversation becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
As soon as you walk into a conversation and you say, this person should be acting like me, problem.
Yeah. I find here also in the Philippines that people are really curious as well. So maybe that's part of it. They want to know where you came from. They want to know your name, your age, what your work. They want to ask these: are you married or single?
They're like inquisitive,
some of the first questions. Yeah, really inquisitive.
Yeah.
Right from the start. Like you can see right behind us, you got some children here just sort of looking on and interested in what we're doing. And it's
I did not
common.
know that, but now I do. I guess that leads me into the main gist of how we ended up meeting you. Tell me your story. What do you do? What's the essence of what you do?
I'm a photographer. I'm a very visual person, and so I express things that are important to me in a visual way. And photography is really that medium that I've chosen to do that. I've always been interested since I was little in the environment and in conservation. My background is actually in conservation biology, is what I studied, and so I've sort of ended up merging these two interests of mine, the environment and the human aspect to that as well, the human relationship with the environment. And I try to use my photography to tell stories, but also be part of the story making process, to share with an audience what's super important, what I feel like is some of the most pressing issues of our day, which is these issues such as climate change, of loss of culture, of indigenous communities, and how their relationship with the land and their environment is so important, and what we can learn from that.
So you basically go into these communities, these indigenous communities, and you photograph them and are in a way telling their story first and foremost, but also your story through their eyes, or, I mean...
Yeah, so... a lot of people, as photographers, we say we're storytellers. We're telling people stories. But I also see it as we're a story maker, right? Because we're telling stories, but we're also choosing what stories to tell, and it's sort of a larger narrative in a sense. So we're actually part of that story making process, what we put out there.
That's a big responsibility, I would say.
It is. It's a huge responsibility. It's also about giving back. So it's this idea of reciprocity, right? And it's sort of, that's an indigenous idea as well. I understand that there's a responsibility to do things right and to get things right, and that requires a lot of time. So this work that I've been doing has been going on for more than a decade now, and it really requires that time commitment to not only take, you know, visually stunning photographs that are going to capture the attention of people, of an audience, but to really learn what it is that the communities want to say.
And how long does that process take? Like, how long do you go spend time with the Indigenous community for on average?
So it really depends. And the interesting thing with this project is that when I first started, I would actually just show up with my wife into an area that I was interested in photographing. And we would make contacts on the ground. So we'd find a tricycle driver and he would say, "Oh, I know this community, let me take you there." So things started really, I guess, organic in that way. But as the years went on, and as the photos started being put out into the world, and the writings that I did with the photographs, communities started to respond to that, actually. Individuals from other communities would say, "Jacob, we loved the way that you did this with the Agta and the Sierra Madre. Can you come to our community in Mindanao and do the same thing that you did with them?"
In essence, they actually liked the way that you were telling their story.
Right.
Or other people's stories, and they wanted their story to be told in the same fashion.
Right. I think that's
cool.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of the ultimate goal, right?
It really is.
Because we got permissions in all different ways. Sometimes the whole community would gather and they would ask, what are we doing there? What we hope to accomplish during our visit? And they would sit and talk as a community and decide if we could stay or not.
Wow.
And then there's other times where you just have to get permission from the elders of the community. And then there were communities that didn't want us to be there either. And so it wasn't always a successful endeavor. There are communities that I wanted to visit for years and years, but they had bad experiences with foreigners coming into their communities in the past, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And so I was never able to go into those communities.
Tell me about the words, "land is life."
Yeah, they're powerful words. Land is life. And I would say in most of the communities we visit, these are the resonating words that they want us to bring out, and for us, the message that they want us to bring to the world. Because for them, they literally mean land is life. When you take away the land, all aspects will go, their languages will start to fade away and disappear. When languages are gone, culture disappears. That is their identity as well. Food, their livelihood, everything, right? And many of these communities are being displaced in different ways. And so they're fighting for their land because they understand that once it's gone or once they're displaced from that, then
it's over.
It's over. All these other things are going to
And history, obviously, is a big proponent of them understanding that, right? They don't have to go through it to see brothers and sisters all over the world, not necessarily immediately from the same culture or tribe or community, but they hear and they say, well, we use that word gentrification. We use that word gentrification in the city quite often.
Yep.
But, I mean, maybe this is the purest sense in a strange way, right? I mean, there's big money coming in saying, we need resorts. We need factories.
Yep.
We need restaurants. We need tourism dollars. And so they're at all costs are protecting this livelihood,
Yeah.
But it's interesting because where we are right now, and I want to get into like some real cool stories that you probably have, but we are in not necessarily an indigenous community.
Yeah.
From what I'm looking around with these tuk-tuks going around, these guys are kind of living in two worlds. It's almost like they're being pulled from both sides. That's the feeling that I'm getting. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we're so close to the city here.
Yeah.
Historically, people from Olango Island were probably living more coastal types of life, fishing, living off of the land itself in a sustainable way. But of course, that's changed as the city has grown, population influx into Cebu, into the surrounding islands, of course. So dynamics have changed. There's consumerism now. There's
Just the the geographic factor of being so close.
yeah,
right?
and I think that has a huge influence on this island in particular.
So talk to me about some of the islands or indigenous communities that you've been to that have just been completely off the grid.
Yeah.
Like I want to hear what is that like? What's that life like?
It's pretty amazing in a lot of ways. I remember entering this one particular community and they were cooking this huge octopus. They were boiling it in water. And it was just a simple bamboo shed that they had. But this beautiful, their view was of some of these limestone mountains and just an amazingly beautiful area. And I don't know, for some reason that has stuck with me, visiting these Tagbanwa communities during that time. And I think that's where I started to really understand humans are really part of the landscape. And we like to try to separate land and people, right? This is wilderness, this is humanity, and there's a separation there,
This
right?
is the suburbs. This is the city.
Yeah.
This is downtown.
We remove ourselves from nature as if we're not part of it.
But that's a very Western concept, right? Because in a lot of indigenous communities, they don't see themselves as anything different, or nature is an extension of themselves, essentially. And it's always been like that for them. So in all of my studies in university, I learned how to manage wildlife populations and create protected areas and conservation areas. But there was never any mention of humans and the human element. But indigenous people are the best stewards of the land. And it's proven 80% of the world's biodiversity is stewarded by 5% of the population, which are considered indigenous. So they're doing something right.
This conversation should be prefaced by the fact that we're asking you to speak on behalf of people. Let's preface that,
Sure.
okay? That is definitely your expert opinion doing this for 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
But let's just make sure the audience understands you're taking this with the utmost respect and making obviously some assumptions based on the conversations you've had, right?
Yeah.
But do you find that indigenous people or communities want to have a relationship with the outside world?
There's such diversity within the indigenous communities within not only in the Philippines but worldwide, right?
Yeah.
When you think of indigenous people, you might think of a tribe, isolated in the mountains somewhere in a forest that has very little contact with the outside world. And yes, there are communities like that. There are tribes like that. But generally speaking, here in the Philippines, that's not the case. Most of the communities do have access to the outside world, but
are they banking outside, or is the debt within the community? How does it work?
Right, so they're probably not as tapped into those type of systems as people from urban environments in the lowlands would be, but they are integrated into the greater Filipino society. But what's different about the indigenous communities here is that they weren't sort of highly westernized or adopted during the Spanish colonial times or the American colonial times here. They didn't adopt all of those systems and religion, and so they sort of were able to keep most of their culture alive.
Kind of untapped, basically.
And a lot of that was due to their isolation at the time, but also many were forced and displaced further up into the mountains so that they could escape the colonial rulers when they came at the time.
They had to adapt.
They
were running, basically. They were trying to avoid these massacres and this abomination of culture, basically.
They didn't want to be subjected to the Spanish at the time, so they retreated.
We talk about that all the time because she's Colombian.
Yeah.
And people think that people in South America are Spanish.
Right.
And it's no.
Right.
The Spanish conquered them and took over everything and turned all these indigenous worship centers or churches into Catholic churches and have literally made history disappear.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just thinking, in Colombia, we're all indigenous, but some people are they refuse to believe that. They're kind of proud of their European. No, they're proud of their European.
Ashamed of the indigenous, I'm saying.
Yeah. I just found out that I'm from this particular tribe from one side of my family, and I got so wrapped up in it and finding out about what their culture was like and everything else. But I was why didn't I think about that before? Why would I think oh yeah, my ancestors are French and Spanish? Why didn't I think, oh, I'm Senu? Why haven't I looked into that part?
That's there's a term for it, but it's everyone's trying to be white.
Yeah, I guess.
You know what I mean? the white people, since the beginning of time, have convinced everyone that white is better. And so even if you see ads, you always see ads of like very light-skinned people or white people, or, you know, in Colombia, I saw a lot of people are like, yeah, we're Spanish and this. It's like, no, you know, there's this idea that white is better, and that's not necessarily the truth, you know?
Not the truth at all.
At all.
Not the truth.
Same here. I mean, after 400 years of colonization, right, that will do that to a society. Like, you adopt systems, you adopt ideologies, you adopt religions, and all of these things are passed down from generation to generation. And so, like, the current generation might not even know that they're doing something that was given to them by, you know, the white people or the colonizers historically. So like even like the educational systems here, all of these things are based on the Western
setup.
You know,
Western
that
setup. So.
You know, you brought up a lot of interesting things, like these indigenous tribes are we're trying to move further and further away. Let me get back to that same question. Do you find that they like to have interaction with the outside world, or do they like to kind of keep to themselves?
I think mostly it's inevitable that communities are interacting with the outside world.
Yeah.
Especially here in the Philippines, we're an island nation here. Many of the islands are small, and so there's really no way to escape from that per se.
Yeah.
The issue is that many of these communities are not choosing for themselves what they want to do. And so they're being forced upon.
Okay.
And so because there's all this pressure from the outside, they're either being displaced from their land, or they're being, the pressure is so big that they have to interact with lowlanders, even if they choose not to, right?
Yeah.
It's not their own, if the choice is not coming from within, it's
So
the pressure from outside.
I think it's a lot of people's perception that it's the choice of the indigenous tribe or community whether to interact or not interact with the outside world. And you're saying no.
It should be, but it's not.
There is these outside forces saying, hey, basically they want their land. I mean, if they didn't want their land, they leave them alone.
Yeah.
That's greed, right? And that's capitalism and consumerism and whatever else we want to call it.
What's the most like remote that you've had to go in one of your projects?
There was a community in the Cordillera in Luzon, and it took us 2 days to hike there.
Wow.
We had to spend a night in a hunter's camp along the path to get to this community. And it was just myself, a guide, and our porter. So the three of us hiking, I think like a 9-hour hike the first day. And then the next day was another full day until we reached the actual community. Because it was really the only way to get into this.
What was it like there?
It's amazing. Like it was, I would say there was probably 40 to 50 households in the community. There were some rice terraces. There was a river that kind of sort of flowed through the community. Sort of idyllic.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So they were completely off the grid.
Pretty much, yeah.
If you're enjoying No Fixed Address, the world's most extraordinary people, we know you'll enjoy Travel That Matters. This season, Travel That Matters is interviewing master chefs like Wolfgang Puck and Danny Meyer, the founder of Shake Shack. Wolfgang Puck talks about his culinary adventures, including the time he was presented with 120 pounds of camel meat, and delves into how his love for travel has shaped his innovative approach to blending local ingredients with international flavors. Danny Meyer explains how childhood travel experiences shaped his restaurant empire and explores the power of family travel, the culinary scene in New York City, and innovative trends in food. Step into the exclusive world of luxury travel on the podcast Travel That Matters and open the doors to top food, adventure, and experiences. Find Travel That Matters wherever you listen to podcasts. You know, one of the things that we hear nowadays more and more as inflation is going crazy, as cost of living is going crazy, you're seeing a big influx in people, especially in America, who are saying, man, I just kind of want to go back to like what my ancestors were doing. I just want to live off the land. Like, I don't need stuff anymore. It's not worth it for me to sit in a 9-to-5 cubicle or 9-to-9 cubicle. Do you think that the indigenous people that you interact with would say, you're right, yes, get out of that?
I think they probably would. Again, I think it also depends on the community and what their situation is and what type of life they're living. I visited communities that are certainly highly marginalized, living well below poverty here, that probably can't even afford or grow enough on their land to feed themselves and get enough nutrition, right? So there are communities that are still struggling on a day-to-day basis. But then, of course, there are communities that more of the resources are going to the community themselves, I guess I would say. And so they can live more comfortably in that regard.
They're more self-sufficient.
Because they
have the resources to make that possible.
They have the resources and the voice because they're semi-autonomous in these regions.
Yeah.
But if you go to a community in the mountains in Mindanao, like Manobo community, it's quite different, right? You have big agricultural companies coming in, mining companies coming in, trying to take their land away. And they don't have the political knowledge or the political power to sort of navigate that as well. Even though there are laws and systems in place, it's still difficult for them. And so it's a struggle on a day-to-day basis. It's a struggle for them because they're fighting for their land, but they're also, trying to feed their families. They're trying to live in a money market economy where there's more pressure being forced upon them.
But the interesting thing, we've used the word community, I don't even know how many times in this conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that word in and itself has a definition. And I don't think that in our lives, we actually use the word correctly, right? This idea of community is having common goals, camaraderie.
Yes.
Do you find that they have more of a common goal together? Are they working together as one?
I would say traditionally, yes, the communities are acting in a communal way where they're trying to uplift everybody in the community. If they're going to create wealth, it's wealth for the community, not for the individual. But as these Western systems are being, more presented in their community, in the cities, and people are leaving the communities and moving to the city for more opportunities, essentially.
My perception and understanding of the individual type of lives that we live in Western societies is just because the rich want to get richer. If we all come together and we all, work together with a common goal, well, guess what? There'll be those really, really rich guys won't exist anymore. They want us to be separated. They want us to be against each other. They want us to be in our cubicles,
It's interesting because the latest project I did from this decade worth of work was putting a book together. And the book took 2 years to produce. But the whole idea was this idea of co-generation. So like this co-generation of knowledge, which was bringing people in that were experts in, from the academe, from editors to artists. It was the indigenous communities sort of took the lead, and they were telling us what their stories and what they wanted us to put out into this book. But then we used the expertise from other disciplines as well to elevate all of those things. So
and there's an understanding of that, by the way, like this code-generated knowledge. When communities really understand that, they truly get this guy is really good at hunting, this guy is really good at photographing, this woman's really good at whatever, you know what I mean? And that communal understanding, there's no ego involved,
right?
Or very little ego. Obviously we all have an ego, but very little ego involved where we're like, hey, I'm good at this and you're good at that. Let's figure this out together.
Yeah. And just going through that process and seeing what we were able to put out, it was so affirming, like an understanding that coming together from different disciplines, different backgrounds, you can really, use that to elevate and do good for a community, for society.
Yeah, you took a community approach to write a book about indigenous communities.
But it was led by the indigenous communities.
Yeah.
This is very meta.
It's very meta. But
he built a community to do a doc on a community on using community.
Using community. But it's interesting because I think we forget that. We forget the power of people around us, the power of a friend, the power of somebody else who knows how to do something better than us.
Well, because we're always fighting like for ourselves. And it's like always like this dog world, and I'm eating milk bone underwear. I mean, that's just the
survival of the fittest.
It's the survival of the fittest mentality, and it's like, listen, we all can win.
Yeah.
We can all win. This is not a zero-sum game here. You know what I mean?
One person's success doesn't mean,
Someone else's demise.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
You know, connectivity plays a big role in what we're just talking about right now, right? This idea that we are connected, but we're really not. Do these indigenous communities that you come in contact with have the same connectivity through social media?
Probably not in the same degree. And I that brings up a really good point. I think I should.
Please.
There was a study done by the U.S. Department of Interior a number of years ago, and the study was about what the youth in the United States have, what their attention is for. So the study showed that that American youth can recognize by the time they're 10 years old something like 1,000 corporate logos in their everyday life.
Wow.
But they couldn't recognize 10 animal or plant species that are native to their local community.
Wow.
And so their attention has been totally stolen by social media, by brands, by companies. And so what's really important has been stolen from them,
You're
right?
blowing my mind right now, man.
And so I feel like, yes, indigenous communities don't have their attention completely stolen like American youth, or
It's all consumerism. It's just it.
consumerism.
It feels like a crisis when you hear it like that you can recognize that many logos and not plant species. That's right about me. I
You said
don't
plants
know.
and animals, not even animals.
Local,
Local. I know, but they
Yeah.
probably got to cat and mouse and hamster, and they were like, I don't know what else is out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's
scary,
It's
dude.
really
It
scary.
is, it is.
How do you? This is an interesting topic that I think is a great segue. Like, how do you build trust with these communities? Like, you're going in and you're photographing them. Like, how do you build trust?
Yeah, that's like one of the most important things for this kind of work, right? But again, I think it all comes back to time. Like, it just takes time. You can't parachute into a community.
How long is it, by the way? What's your time?
For like a particular community?
Yeah.
So it's multiple visits. So I'll go in, I'll spend 2 weeks with the community. 2 years later, I'll go back for another
Wow.
2 weeks. So it's actually establishing and forming a relationship with the community over time. And that's why this work has taken so long, because that's really the only respectful, responsible way to do this work.
How has this time that you spend, which sounds like a lot, impacted your everyday life?
Yeah, I think I'm a bit more grounded in a lot of ways. Try to be a bit more balanced in my life. And I guess I find that in the communities where the communities themselves seem a bit more balanced in the things that they are doing. This relationship that they have that is so local, there's something really powerful about that.
Land is
Because
life, man.
Land is life.
That's gonna
totally, yeah.
haunt me in the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna stop thinking about that for a very, very long time. Talk to me about any misconceptions that people have or that could be incorrect about the Philippines in general or indigenous people that you actively possibly might want to, correct.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that, again, people think indigenous people tribes live sort of isolated away from modern society. But, indigenous people are, they're astronomers, they're navigators, they're artists, they're knowledge keepers. They're all of these things, right? And they're highly nuanced and sophisticated as well. And they're not living in the past. They're actually, indigenous people are modern people that have a different way of looking at life and a different perspective on life.
Wow.
And we really should try to embrace that, because most of the world, we're living under sort of this Western system, right? And indigenous communities have this diversity of perspectives and ways of looking at the world. And I think we need more of that in the world. So we need to, I think, take more time to listen
I love
from
that.
these different perspectives, right? And that's,
Yeah, because you're right. There is this notion of like, and you saw how my questions were poised, somewhat similar to that perception of what I believe or what a lot of people believe indigenous communities are about. And you've definitely turned that on its head for sure, right? This idea of being not only involved with the outside world, but what I find the most fascinating is that they're trying their hardest to sustain their way of life the way they see it's best, while continuing to have a relationship with outside politics as much as they probably don't want to. But most importantly, you're saying, no, they're here. They're here and now. You know, they just happen to live life a little bit differently than you. And guess what? You're probably not the best person to take advice from.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at where the state of the world is today, like where we have wars, we have climate change, we have all of these things that are really a result of the way humans have, you know, taken resources from the earth,
Pillaged
the natural exactly pillaged the land, right? Generally speaking, Indigenous people have a very different way of having this relationship. They don't think of humans on top of this pyramid, and we're all the same. We're all the same. We're all part of. It's a web of life, and we're just one part of that, right? The tree beings, the animal beings, they're all just one part of this integrated system, and
we're all here together. When we die, we become them.
Yep.
You know, when we eat them, they become us. It's like this full circle of life that I think we've a lot in the Western world has completely lost context.
Totally disconnected from that.
Disconnected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You know what I love? I love that there is so many different ways to live life, because I think a lot of people think, oh, it's just one way, or you go off the grid and then that's it. You don't really have the idea that there's so many options and you could connect with the earth in different ways. And within the communities, there's so much variety, you know, that you could choose to live life, and it's not the past. That's the thing that hit me, time, because you think about it, oh, it's the past, the future means the internet, the future means your phone, but why does it have to?
I think what Wade Davis, the anthropologist, says it's the catalog of, you know, culture is the catalog of human imagination, right? And I think that's so beautiful because it really is, and it's
describe that to me.
You know, cultures interact with the world in different ways, so it's a different expressions of how we view the world and interact with our surroundings.
In the purest form.
Purest form, like
how we interact with each other, how we eat, how we use our forks, do we use chopsticks, do we not? Like, it's crazy.
And culture is an expression of language. So like our languages evolved from the environment that we evolved in, right? So like in the Philippines, for example, there's 186 languages. 175 of those are indigenous languages. And it's not just island to island where the language is completely different, where, you know, they wouldn't understand each other, but it's like one valley to the next valley. It's a completely different language. And so it's actually shown, like, in the areas where there's the highest biodiversity, where there's the most diversity of life, you also have the most diversity of languages as well. And culture is the same, is an expression of all of that. So it's just different ways of interacting with our environment. And that's what really culture is. That's what where language evolved from. And these things are dynamic, right? They're changing because our environments change.
It's weird.
And so,
it's weird because, I don't know, I just had this weird thought. Like, before us, the world was evolving. After us, the world would evolve. It's indefinite. But if we weren't humans, there'd probably be something else coming after us. We've just stopped it all. The selfishness has just said, nothing's going to be above us, okay? We're going to stop any sort of evolution. Even worse, we're going to kill off any possibility of any evolution in any other animals. That's why everything's going extinct. It's sick, to be honest. I thought I was going to come out of this inspired. I'm coming out a little bit depressed.
Right. No, we should be inspired, because we have indigenous communities all around the world that have kept their experiences through thousands and thousands of years, right? So they can offer a different perspective from what the things that we have grown from a Western worldview. They offer, like, the indigenous people should be the teachers. They're these knowledge keepers of offering a different choice, a different perspective on solving problems.
Medicine, whatever.
Medicine. I mean, in all aspects, of life.
If we could just like open up our ears a little bit and hear people.
It's opening up our ears and figuring out ways to let them be represented in the bigger decisions that are being done, you know, at the table and whatever.
Well, at the very least, the ones that are affecting their communities.
Absolutely.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we like to do a speed round at the end of every conversation.
Cool. Yeah. Okay.
You cannot think.
All right.
You have to answer.
All right.
And it has to be quick.
All right.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Oh man, I think I would be here in the Philippines somewhere, maybe outside of the city in a little bit more remote place, somewhere where there's a forest nearby.
And why?
Maybe to connect with the land a bit more. I live in an urban environment, and I sort of miss that. I get it when I travel to the communities,
Yeah.
but I would love to be able to be in a place where I could really connect at a deeper level on a day-to-day basis.
If you do that, then you got to photograph the city people.
That's right. Mix it up.
The reverse.
Yeah.
What makes you happiest?
I think what makes me happiest is that I have the freedom and the flexibility to choose the work that I can do. And so that gives me the opportunity to dive into these stories and visit and learn from communities that I might not otherwise be able to. And so, yeah,
What are you most scared of?
nothing comes to mind, I guess. Death, maybe.
Okay.
I feel like I've not done enough before I die.
What is your biggest regret?
Wow. Maybe not being able to provide like financially as much as I might be able to if I took like a typical job for my family. By choosing this path, I've chosen experiences versus like financial.
That's a big one, man.
So,
that
yeah.
hits hard, right? You made some sacrifices that for what made you happy, but
I hope-
possibly,
I hope that, the kids will, because we're giving them experiences as
Yeah.
well. And so I'm hoping that will translate into something good for their lives as well. But looking back, I wouldn't change anything because, I don't know, like, I guess I can't imagine my life being any other way at this point.
Yeah.
that's like the best thing you could ever say about your life. So where can we find you? Tell us about your book. Give me your website. Give me your Instagram, whatever, however you want people to
Yeah. So
support you in any way.
I guess, yeah, I was talking about the book earlier. We published this photography book, but it actually is deeper than that because we have a series of essays in it. And it talks about Indigenous Philippines, but it actually, the topics that are there relate to Indigenous communities throughout the world, really.
What's it called?
It's called Homelands.
Where can they buy it?
Homelands.ph. It's Homelands with an S.
Listen, man, thank you so much. Life is land. Or
Land is life.
Land is life.
Yeah. A beautiful saying, right?
I mean, there's nothing more.
It's nothing more.
You don't have anything without it.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. That was
Thank
great.
you guys.
Wow, what an emotional conversation. The ups, the downs. It's always extremely impactful for me when I better understand a different way to live. And this conversation alone has definitely changed my perception on Indigenous people, on myself, on everything. Thank you for listening. This is No Fixed Address presented by Matador Network.
Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We release new episodes every other Thursday.